One morning, George the steamroller was sitting in the yard. Hurry up, I want to get to the scrap yard. Well, you'll just have to wait, George. I will be a minute, said his driver. Rumph, George said crossly. Then he looked over and saw Duncan and Rheneas. You know, I'm going to the scrap yard to break up little engines like you.
Rheneas just ignored George, but Duncan was cross. Flatten the little engines like us? I don't think so. We take passengers and pull trucks. We're really useful. All you're good for is flattening loads.
You know, you're right, Duncan. I do flatten the roads, which means every road on Sodor belongs to me.
Then George looked at the rails.
And soon I will flatten all your rails as well and turn them into roads.
Rheneas laughed.
You need to realize, George, that all the rails are going nowhere. Just you wait and see. I rule the roads, and I will rule all of you too.
And then George headed for the scrapyard. On his way there, he was thinking about the railway tracks.
Railways, they're no good. They should be pulled up and turned into roads.
When he arrived at the scrapyard, he saw Trevor.
You're back. After all these years. You're best letting me tear you up now before you fall apart yourself. Silly old traction engine.
Trevor was furious. I'm not here to be scrapped. Jem Cole's here seeing one of the workmen. Just because you have that big ruler in front of you doesn't mean you're better than all of us.
Well, Trevor, there's something you don't realize. I created the roads that you all run on, and you will all show me respect.
Then George looked over at all the scrap cars.
Those cars took the road I created for them for granted, and that is why I will tear them up,
he said viciously. Then George's driver returned.
Right, George, time to go back to the shed. What? But I'm here to flatten all those cars. Oh, don't be so silly, George. We're only here because I had to ask one of the scrap workers if he could keep me a piece of metal. You can't be serious. Oh, I'm serious all right, George. Now come on, we better get back to the shed.
As George was going back to the shed, he looked over and saw railway tracks.
Maybe I should teach those engines a lesson, he said.
He was going through a level crossing when he suddenly stopped. His driver couldn't make a move.
What are you doing?
He asked.
I'm not going. I'm gonna teach those engines a lesson. A train will be coming down any minute. George, you can't do this,
shouted his driver. George had forced his brakes on, which meant his driver couldn't pull the handle. Then the signalman came out quickly.
Get out of the way! Murdoch's coming!
He yelled. Murdoch was getting closer, and George's driver was scared.
Please, George, we have to go!
He shouted. George looked back and saw Bertie coming.
Okay,
he said. Then George moved out of the way. There was more trouble. Bertie's driver saw the crossing open and thought there was no train coming down. So when Bertie went onto the crossing, the gates automatically closed, and Bertie bumped into the gate. Then a horrified Bertie and his driver looked over and saw Murdoch approaching.
Oh no! Save me!
Screamed Bertie. Bertie's driver quickly reversed him back and had no choice but to drive him up the other lane. And luckily he missed Murdoch just by a few inches. Bertie, his driver and passengers were all very badly shaken. Then Birdie's driver quickly drove them onto the grass, and the signalman came down.
I'm so sorry. I just closed the gates as you arrived. That steamroller just stopped on the crossing.
Why? Asked Birdie's driver.
That's that George. He's always up to no good.
Birdie said crossly.
I shall phone the police,
Said the signalman.
Hey! Do not move!
He shouted over to George's driver.
You've done it this time, George,
Said the worried driver. Soon a policeman arrived and spoke to George's driver.
So what you're saying is, the steamroller refused to move? Yes, he just stopped in the crossing. What do you mean when you say he stopped at the crossing? He just forced his brakes on. I'm sorry, sir, but you have the power over vehicles. I'm serious. He just forced the brakes on. Tell him, George.
But George just sat smirking.
I am arresting you on suspicion of dangerous driving. You do not have to say anything but may harm your defence when questioning something that should later rely on in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence.
The poor driver was terrified.
George, please!
He cried. George looked over at his driver, and he kind of felt sorry for him.
Excuse me, officer. I did put my brakes on.
The policeman was surprised.
But that is impossible. Or it is possible, but it takes years of practice. You have to want to do it. You have to feel the inside of you and strain yourself very hard. And then you can jam your brakes on.
The police officer didn't know what to do.
But this is no good. I can arrest the steamroller.
But George's driver had an idea.
I know something he could do. Something he will hate. This is disgraceful. You want me to race Fearless Freddy? Oh, come on, George. It's for charity. Charity.
Then the guard was ready to blow his whistle.
On your marks. Get set. Go!
Freddy set off in a flash, but George slowly followed behind.
False start! It's a false start! Are none of you listening? Oh, bother.